Hello, everybody. As Anne was just saying, my name's Tom Wright. I think you all know me. Welcome to another exciting installment of Ask the Expert. Today, I'm mostly chaperoning my good friend and colleague Matthew Jones. When Anne asked about this topic, he sprung to mind immediately. I already kind of send him leads for this sort of work whenever it comes up in my business. My mum used to have a saying, which was, if there's a dog in the house, why bark? And Matthew is the dog in my house when it comes to generative engine optimization. Yeah, welcome, Matthew.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everybody else, for joining this morning. So my name's Matt Jones. I run my own tech consultancy called Normo. We've been going about 24 months now, but before that, got a background in software and consulting going back 25 years or so, both large corporates, number of different startups, and AI and generative engine optimization is something that's fairly new to me too. So I'm probably only about sort of 6 months further down the line than most of you on the call will be. Although I do have a bit more, probably got a bit more of a background in AI, machine learning, and software and technology. So I'm not coming completely cold. I am going to share my screen because we've got a few pictures to that accompany this presentation. So if you bear with me. Now, can everybody see that okay?
I can.
Lovely.
Yeah, spoken
Okay.
for, brilliant. We'll assume everyone can. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. And obviously, you know Tom already. There's a little bit more about myself. Interestingly, that picture there on the right is Maidenhead Railway Bridge, which crosses the River Thames. A friend of mine took the photo, and what you can't see just out of shot is a little plaque dedicated to Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who I'm sure many of you heard of, a very famous Victorian designer and engineer who designed that bridge back in, I think, 1836 or sometime. And when the bridge was first built, the many of the other designers and engineers thought the arches were so flat that they refused to take the supports out from under the bridge because they were worried the bridge was going to collapse. And it was only when there was a storm in the weeks that followed where the supports under the bridge were sort of blown out and washed away and the bridge was still standing that people realized that this new design really was going to work, and it just proved sort of Isambard Kingdom that Brunel as a brilliant engineer. And that sort of that time of the transition from the agrarian world, the industrial world, and the railways is a little bit like where we are today with that transition from the information world to AI and everything that artificial intelligence is doing and bringing to the way that every one of us is working, is going to be working in the future. So, in terms of GEO or generative engine optimization, sometimes you might have seen other references to it as a mouthful, LLMO or AIEO, so large language models or artificial intelligence engine optimization. So really what this is all about is, if you think Claude, if you think ChatGPT, if you think Perplexity, any of those other AI-powered chatbots that have come to the fore, particularly since ChatGPT launched in November 2022, there's been a whole new, really sort of science and art that has taken hold, because the way that those LLMs search the internet and process the information and present results is very, very different to that other big elephant in the room in the internet world, which is Google. of course, and Google search. So what has come about is that everything that was known and which has evolved over the last 10, 15 years or so in terms of search engine optimization, a lot of that has changed and is somewhat getting turned on its head if you as a brand or you as an individual or your products and you're wanting to make sure that they're getting referenced and shown in those AI chatbot results. So really that's the core of what GEO is all about, is how can you as a brand take steps to raise your visibility in those chatbot results. So if
It's
people have got questions, then other comments to say, then please feel free to jump in. So Tom, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask for a quick kind of show of hands or nods. Is this something that people have experimented with? Have you like searched for your own brand in AI? Have you gone to ChatGPT and yeah, thought a little bit? Okay. Anybody else? No, it's I'll say for my own sake, it can be quite disappointing. If I go in there and ask Claude, give me an AI consultancy in Cambridgeshire, sometimes it will come up with me. Often it won't, and I think, well, I need to get better at this. So to Matt's point earlier, this is a fairly new field. We're all learning as we go along a little bit. Just a few of Matt's a little bit further through the book than the rest of us.
Good stuff. So here's just a handful of stats on the left side. So ChatGPT, as you'll be aware, has been growing phenomenally. At the end of 2024, there was something like it's getting 40 million daily users. By end of 2025, 120 million daily users, and obviously growth quite like that doesn't necessarily continue forever, but I have extrapolated it. That's what the graph on the right looks like, and clearly it would suggest that the popularity amongst LLMs for consumers looking for information, it's before too long it's going to overtake essentially Google as a place that consumers or users go to for where they want to find information. Now, of course, there are many nuances to that, not least because obviously, as I'm sure you'll be aware, Google has been responding. So if you look at the Google search results today, they'll be very different to what they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. And what you may have noticed is that the not it's quite difficult. You typically have to scroll to page 2 or page 3 to see those what they call organic search results, which are meant to be driven by their mysterious algorithm. And at the top, you see the sponsored search results, which everybody knows. Whoever bids the highest number is going to appear at the top of the rankings. Then even above those paid for search results, you get the AI summaries, and those AI summaries are what essentially Google's response has been to ChatGPT and Claude to pass and represent information in a similar way to how ChatGPT or Perplexity do things. So there are nuances to that chart there on the top right, but it is a huge phenomenon. There's obviously a huge amount of investment going into that space, and consumer habits are changing. And it's not just ChatGPT. There are those other chatbots, whether it's Google Gemini itself, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity, Claude, a whole host of others. So this is a real thing. And what's been discovered in sort of research, particularly in 2025, is that now this probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. That younger generation, so people in that 16 to 24-year-old age group, maybe they have more time, maybe they have more interest in tech, maybe they're spending more time in sort of social media and all sorts of things. They're embracing ChatGPT and these other LLMs as their default place to go for looking for information. And so, as the stats here suggest, 78% of them in the US in that age group, compared to all users, are actually turning to these chatbots, and they're turning to these AI chatbots to do things like discover new products, to discover new brands, which the other age groups, funnily enough, are a little bit slower at the mark at doing. But ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, those sorts of things. And what's interesting is that the questions that people are asking of these AI chatbots are a little bit different to what you might put into a historically into standard a Google search, where you might just input a handful of keywords. So I've got an example on the next page. So we'll come to that in just a sec, where you might input cheap flights to Rome, and then you get a link to. Let me just go forward to that one. Flights London to Rome, and you get a set of results which you can then potentially sort of click through to book your own flight through the respective brands' websites. And then how the AI chatbots work is that you can actually ask far more informational or more complex questions. You can provide context to those questions you're asking, and you get a much more nuanced answer directly there and in that chatbot. I mean, clearly this is a very, very simple example, but hopefully that's going to kind of illustrates the kind of thing that you can do. Have people, when people are here on the call are using chatbots, what are some of the things that you're using them for? What are some of the more complex queries you've been asking? Any thoughts, Tom?
Well, I was just going to encourage everyone else not to be shy. But yeah, I was looking for a venue for an event the other day and was asking Perplexity as it happens. And yeah, I think my query was a lot more upfront with my requirements, my specifications, than it would have been if I'd been Googling. As it happens, the results were very outdated, which was, I think, more reflection on Perplexity than anything else. But yeah, curious to know if anyone else on the call has had any adventures in doing kind of advanced research with AI recently. We've got
I,
something in the
I
chat
just
here. Yeah. Oh.
I've just learned to be really specific. Like I think I just picked it up as it went along, but I'll be like, I'm looking for a one-legged co-working space owner who likes David Bowie and eats fish fingers on Fridays, and it gets very, very specific. And because I know where I'm searching, I know, like in that result there, it said there's a guy called Tom Lewis, and he kind of retired from the industry a couple of years ago, so it is out of date. But I know if it had come up Anne Hawkins, co-working expert, I know she knows a lot about community, but she's not about to open a co-working space. So I find if I just if I know the area I'm searching in, I'm really, really specific. But then if
Mm.
I'm going into something else, I kind of go one level. I know I need to go like three levels down to learn that bit of industry. But I talk to my computer all the time now. So it's much easier to say like blah, 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 blah. Whereas I think with you're a bit more efficient when you're typing.
I find the same thing. I use voice mode a lot because I'm less inhibited. I just blather on, as you probably noticed on these calls. Yeah. We have someone in the chat as well saying research relating to work stuff, ethical and sustainable credentials for companies offering products that they're after as well. So yeah.
Now, one of the things that has also been uncovered in some research from last year is this phenomena called, or it's been named zero click. So which comes from the fact that quite often the results in the chatbots, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, others, the results, the information provided is so good, or at first glance, it's so good that people are less likely to click through to the source of that information, to the follow-on page, like you see from a traditional set of search results, which actually presents some complications for you as a brand who's looking to get brand recognition for your product or your services. You might have been running, probably still running, a number of ads with Google, but if those ads are not actually encouraging users to click through to your website for more information or to buy something, then there's that sort of dichotomy of power, and well, it's it's as much a problem for Google as it is for every other business, small business in the world that wants information about them to be found. And so that's why some of these geo techniques can potentially make a difference to you as a small business and what you're doing. So let's move forward. What is interesting though is that if your business and you have a website and you have spent some time in the last, even in just the last 5 years or more, of addressing some of the basics of as known as sort of search engine optimization, that stuff is still good. If you are getting human visitors to your website, then it may well be because you have those listed here as backlinks. So the links through from, whether it could be local business communities or industry bodies or sources of information, the people are still able to find you through those backlinks. So don't give up on efforts to get your site listed in places that you think it may be useful for you to do so. I'd say the same thing about keywords. Now, again, if you're working in the travel space, for example, and you focus on offering travel packages on cruises, or perhaps it's to certain places in South America, for example, then actually having those keywords that are relevant to your business, that's still going to be important for whether it's the Google web crawlers or the AI web crawlers that are searching the internet and finding information. So don't give up on strategically scattering those important sort of keywords on your website. And the last thing to think about, if there's industry news or local news or webinars and so on, which you can get onto, sort of market your company, your products, your services, then that's still going to be valuable activity to do in the years ahead. Those are the foundations that you want to keep doing. It's where GEO comes on. It's some of the additional layers that will start to make a difference.
And just to add to that, 2 points, Matt. One is, for anyone who's been around SEO for a long time, you'll be aware that there's sort of good ways of doing these things and less good ways of doing these things. So back in the day, people would be buying backlinks on random websites. I think those tactics never really worked for SEO or for humans. And I think the same is true in the AI landscape. focus on quality and relevance when you're doing any of these three techniques. The other point I'd make is that for things like, especially keywords and content, but also to a certain extent backlinks, chat to your AI of choice about kind of strategy around this. Use it as a thought partner to help you, figure out which keywords you might be missing, what would be good topics for content, and where would be good sites to target for backlinks.
Thanks, Tom. So moving forward and thinking about GEO, thinking about ChatGPT, Claude, those other AI chatbots, what are either some of the things that you can do today, or you can ask your website host or web developer to look at and confirm? And so a couple of these things have been there for a while. So having a sitemap which describes in XML what are the key pages on your website, that's still really, really important. And you can generate a sitemap and upload it to the Google Search Console, but it's also something which the LLMs are going to be using to when they find your site. Robots.txt, again, that's something which has existed for 20 years. But what it's particularly useful for is if you have a website and there's a series of files on in a folder, and you don't want the crawlers to search or to reference particular files and particular subfolders, then robots.txt is where you specify do not search in these folders because it's irrelevant information. It just happens to be there because it's an old application or something which is no longer relevant. Now, what is new with GEO and LLMs, and it's a kind of an emerging standard, is this thing called LLMS.txt, and I've got an example of that on the next slide, which is basically the one I've created and uploaded for my company to my web host. And as you can see, it's just straight text information. They're called large language models because what they're doing is they are processing language, and any of those kind of images and beautiful designs and creativity that you have on your website, they may work extremely well for humans and garnering their attention, but for the AI chatbots themselves, they just want to interpret text. So if you've got somewhere that's very, very clear and has short summaries in something called Markdown language that just describes your business and its services, then an LLMs.txt file is something which is perhaps possibly the most basic thing which you can do, which will help you have some relevant content that's going to get surfaced in the LLMs. And what I've got here on the left is this thing called the sitemap.xml. Those things have been around for a long time. When I looked at my own sitemap.xml earlier in the year, that it existed, but it just had one line in it. It didn't have sort of 20 entries listing out the key pages. And what you can also include here is how often that page gets updated and its priority. So anything with a priority that is towards the number one is going to be top priority, and you're essentially telling the web crawler or the AI crawler how important this particular page is in your website structure. So there's some quite valuable things that you can do there, which should not be too difficult in collaboration with your web host and your web developer.
Matt, just a quick question in the chat.
Yeah.
The question is, do you add keywords to the LLM.txt? And I think let's interpret it two ways. Like, A, is there a section called keywords? And B, what's the importance of thinking about the keywords in the LLMs.text content?
So that is a good a good question. From what I've seen is that people are keeping them keep keeping them quite separate and keeping the LLMs.txt as a literally a very simple sort of straightforward file describing your business rather than overloading it with keywords. You could have that is probably quite a relevant thing actually having a section called keywords and list your 10 favorite keywords just to um, double dot and double cross the T's. That's probably something I should add to my own one here, but I don't necessarily have a firm conclusion on that.
Yeah, interesting. I think so. It's an unstructured file. Like you could put in whatever sections you felt were relevant, and keywords could be one of them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Cool. Whilst we're here, curious again. Sorry, audience participation time. Quick show of hands. Who already has a sitemaps or a robots file on their website? Who knows for a start? That's yeah. Okay. A few hands raised.
Can I
Um,
ask a question about the sitemap file?
sure.
Because basically, I'm right in a big issue with this kind of stuff at the minute. So I use Yoast, and that just generates basically just a list of links. So I've just taken a screenshot of that sitemap example because
Mm.
that's obviously a lot more detailed and something that I guess you are going to be hand creating rather than.
Right. Yeah. I think you'd rarely handwrite these if you're using a CMS already to manage your content. Having it generated is a smart move. Yeah.
Okay. So somewhere in Yoast, I should be able to be adding in more of that kind of level of like priority and frequency of changing. And
I mean, not
don't worry, it's
necessarily. I mean, no. So, I mean, I'm more familiar with the WordPress world, where I know there's a range of plugins, some of which do let you customize that stuff. Others are much more sort of, plug and play, where it's kind of, they'll just generate the list of the pages,
yeah. Well,
but
no, so
not any
this
of the
is
metadata. Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean I am talking about WordPress, but yeah.
Ah,
Anyway, no,
sorry.
it's a thing to dig into. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Um, so I see.
And
Oh, sorry, Matt.
sorry, if there's another question, let's go for the question.
No, no, I was just gonna. So we see in the chat that lots of people have, well, a few people have got sitemaps and robots, but not LLMs. Does anybody already have like an LLMs.text on their website? No. Okay. It might be like I think this is a really good quick win to identify. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, Matt, back to you.
Yeah, and I was going to say the other thing to check with your web host or web developer is that middle item there. So whether um, if your web host or your CMS is using Cloudflare, which is one of the most widely used what they call the domain
CDN.
name service
Oh, okay.
providers, DNS providers globally, which essentially resolves that your www.website.com to an IP address, which is a number to identify the your your web server. They have a lot of what's the word sort of screens and other things in place to prevent or to reduce sort of hacks and attacks from a chatbot, not chatbots, by botnets and other types of services. And they're one of the, not many people have heard of them, but they're one of the biggest, most important sort of companies in global internet infrastructure. And since July last year, they've actually switched off access for the AI crawlers to crawl uh, their clients' websites by default. So unless your web host has ask for that to be switched back on, now then a lot of these things may actually impact your visibility in the LLM. So, for example, my web host that I've been using is something called Webflow, and there's a checkbox in my admin panel which says I can allow Cloudflare and I can allow AI crawlers to find my website. So I can do that from my admin panel. I think Wix and some of the other sort of hosting platforms, that's still switched off by default. So it is well worth checking, because that will have an impact on whether those AI crawlers can find you or not. And it may be your preference. You may not want to be found for your own reasons, but if you do, then that is going to have an impact. And then the last thing on this slide here is that there's some again, a little bit more than anecdotal evidence has found that ChatGPT and some of the other LLMs, they pull a lot of their content from Reddit, and even more so from Wikipedia. So if your small business is developed enough, or if you have the time to create your own Wikipedia page, you don't even need to be a celebrity or a historical figure to do that. It might be something worth considering. And certainly Reddit, which, if you don't know, is a kind of a bulletin board and user forum for asking lots of questions for humans to respond to. Quora is another. Those are strong reference points for the AI web crawlers for somewhat reliable information. So if there's a topic that's relevant to your business, do a search in Reddit and go and answer a question or two, and somewhere along the line that may influence how high up the tier in the LLM results you appear. So looking forward a little bit further into the future, there are other things which you can do which will improve your visibility and chances of being found by the LLMs. The first of those items is something which probably doesn't come as too much of a surprise. You may be doing this already. You may, on your website, you may have a FAQs page, so frequently asked questions. Those are sort of things, because it's text content and it's not an image clearly, then it's something the AI chatbots really, really like, because it's easy for them to interpret and easy for them to essentially recreate in their results. And I've got an example of something else. So other things would include things like tabular information and comparison tables. Now, it's probably no coincidence, and if you spend as much time online as probably Tom does, or I do, you probably noticed this in the last 12 months or so. There's been a huge increase in the numbers of, you go to a website and you see tables of information comparing a brand's particular set of products with some competitor products and the reasons why you should choose my brand. That's no coincidence, because that is exactly the information that the chatbots like, because it's easy for them to represent that to consumers of their own services, but on the right occasion. So comparison tables, FAQs, they will stand you in good stead if you're able to create that for your own content.
These AI systems are fundamentally very lazy. If you can spoon feed them almost, FAQs are great because they answer the question that might be asked on the AI chatbot program, right? So if they can go, I've got a perfect match for this, I don't need to do any thinking. Here's your answer. It can really help boost your chances of getting cited.
And then not the last thing on this slide, sort of academic studies. It's not going to be relevant for every business, and either writing or creating a academic study can be a very time-consuming process. Tom, you've probably written a few of those in your time. How long did it take for yours to get published?
So the story I always tell people is that the last one I ever got published when I was in academia was published 8 years after I'd left academia.
Right.
So I kind of gave up after that.
Okay.
But I was in a particularly slow field, so that was part of my problem.
But what is interesting in certain industries, whether it's pharmaceuticals and others, where the creation of academic papers is part of the process of drug discovery, drug development, and same in all sorts of fields, from software and other things. The LLMs and the chatbots do put a lot of credence and probably faith is not quite the right word, but they are more likely to refer your product, your service, your brand, your point of view if it's been cited in an academic study from a famous brand university or hospital. And that's one of the strongest ways that you will get cited. And if you are in ChatGPT or you're in Claude and it presents a set of results for you and it's not providing the citations, then you can just add to your query, please provide citations, and it should return you the series of links to the websites, Wikipedia, Reddit, the archives for academic studies where it's found information that it's presenting to you, so you can sort of really double check the results. That's what consumers and users are doing, and by creating those studies, you're helping to fuel that. And just coming back to the last thing here around query matching, we've got something down here to show you. There are various tools you can use, software tools, which will help you both understand your visibility within those LLMs and AI chatbots. And there's a number of them. That some of them come from the SEO space. So there's something called SEMrush. There's another called RFs. There's something called Searchable. There's one which I've bought a license for and have been experimenting the last couple of months with. There's something called Profound. Can people see that?
I can.
And there's a lot of great webinars on this platform here, but it's quite complicated, and it will take you a little bit of time to understand everything that's going on. But what you are able to do is if you pay for a license, is to analyze for a particular brand particular questions that are asking of an LLM and the responses you're getting back. So Pillow, that was a small consumer brand that I was working with earlier in the year, and they're funny enough, as the name suggests, a specialist pillow manufacturer. And one of their strongest themes is their natural fiber pillow products, all goose down, duck down, and uh, and so on, and they're clearly going up against some pretty tough competition as far as you think about big brands spending a huge amount of money on their online advertising and marketing efforts and so on. So it should come as no surprise that a small brand like that, their visibility in the AI chatbots is, as you can see, sort of ranked down there at 74 in the set of results, but that they are appearing. There's work to do, and what a tool like Profound, there's many other tools out there. They'll let you how they work essentially is based on a series of topics. So things like bedding, Siberian goose, soft pillow, sleep duvet, back sleeper, side sleeper, front sleeper, and so on. Based on a key topic word, the tool will create something what Bernie was suggesting earlier. So if you create a very, very specific query, so this one, where can I buy hotel quality goose or duck down pillows and hypoallergenic duvets online in the UK? That's a very, very detailed, very specific query where you probably already know the results for. But for Pillow, their niche is really that they provide hotel quality or hotel style pillows, and if a consumer uses that word in their query, they're going to appear. They are actually going to appear somewhere up higher in those search results. And then what this tool does, it will send these questions, a set of 25 questions or so, to the LLMs, so to ChatGPT, to Perplexity, to Google AI, every day for 7 days in this case, or it could be a month or an ongoing basis. And then you can see how your results are changing over time as you change the content, as you add those FAQ pages, as you add those structured tables, as you make sure that you're enabled for Cloudflare is enabled to find you as a brand and so on, and you'll be able to monitor those changes over time. Now, it's potentially quite time consuming. It's potentially quite costly if you're just a one person or two person business trying to do this for your own brand. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that you do this directly yourselves. You can obviously work with small agencies or find a lot of advice online, or come and ask people like Tom and myself as to what some of our tips and tricks are. But that's where a lot of the direction is going in terms of optimization for search engines and for LLMs. So I think that's pretty much what we most of what we had to talk about this morning. I think it was come back to questions really for the group.